economist Ralph Henry. Good morning and welcome.
Morning. Thank you for welcoming me.
All right. Well, I mean, the
Mhm.
conversation has been long-standing since before the budget was presented to now. Conversations have
Mhm.
been happening in the space regarding the allocation for Tobago, and there have
Mhm.
been, arguments on both sides. We have heard senators saying that though the allocation may not seem sufficient, there are national projects that are happening that directly impact Tobago's development, while on the THA end of things, there's the conversation regarding stifling Tobago development through underfunding. Can you
Mhm.
give us some perspective from where you sit?
Well, I suppose the budget would be seen as inadequate relative to Tobago's needs, but one needs to point out that the Minister of Finance projected a deficit. So it means that the overall expenditure of the government of Trinidad and Tobago is the revenue is inadequate to meet the expenditure that has been planned. And it means, in effect, that nobody would have gotten the allocations that they would have expected or required. And that's the situation in respect of Tobago. One should add, however, that the Minister of Finance did indicate that he is allocating within the limit, at least it's just above the lower limit that has been set by the Dispute Resolution Commission, which is 4.03. None of our governments have ever got much beyond that lower limit of 4.03% of the national allocation being made available to Tobago. So this is where it's at. And there'll always be complaints on both sides that the Tobago has gotten as much as could be secured from the revenue that is anticipated, and Tobago would argue that it has not gotten enough, and clearly Tobago needs a lot more funding in keeping with the objectives of the present THA and even the past THA.
Right, and we have heard persons on
Mm-hmm.
the THA side, specifically
Mm-hmm.
technical officer at the Division of Finance, Mr. Anselm Richards, stating
Mm-hmm.
that the DRC ruling is
Mm-hmm.
outdated in 2024. That
Mm-hmm.
4.03 to
Mm-hmm.
6.9, that
Mm-hmm.
limit should not still
Mm-hmm.
be applied in 2024, to a growing population, especially when we account for things like inflation and the difference in prices between Trinidad and Tobago. It is no secret that Tobagonians
Mm-hmm.
often pay more for products than in
That's
Trinidad. It's no secret that Tobagonians are often,
mm-hmm.
venturing down to Trinidad to clear goods, to clear products, just to bring back
Mm-hmm.
to Tobago. That puts on that extra expense for persons here on the
Mm-hmm.
island.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in agreement that that type of measurement for what
Mm-hmm.
Tobago is allocated is a bit outdated in 2024?
Yes, it is. And the present administration and the previous administration have made that point that the 4.03 is absolutely inadequate, having regard to the situation in Tobago, which has always been dependent, well, I wouldn't say from time immemorial, but has been dependent on securing goods and services from Trinidad, which results in a pass on of costs. So things that are landed in Trinidad have to come to Tobago with an added expenditure in terms of transport. So all these things will usually be much more expensive in Tobago than in Trinidad. That's a fact. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
so
even
they're,
as
so they're, they're both right.
All right, and even as Tobago, has
Mm-hmm.
this back and forth struggle, pull
Mm-hmm.
and tug for resources where the development budget is concerned, Trying to go to the dispute resolution committee now is a lengthy process. That we may not see the result of maybe until next year. In the meantime, what are some financial and economic decisions that can be an alternative to the national budget that Tobago can use to fulfill its development mandate?
Well, whether it's at the dispute resolution commission or is with discussions between the central government and the local government, it's the matter of a decision as to whether the Tobago or the THA is allowed to secure additional financing is still the issue. And I think the previous THA administration did secure the agreement of the central government in raising some finance from elsewhere. I don't know to what extent the present administration has been able to secure that sort of privilege. I think in the past the THA did access financing directly from the Caribbean Development Bank. I don't know all the details of it, but I have a sense that it was able to secure financing for particular projects in Tobago from the Caribbean Development Bank. So, it's a negotiation process, whether it's at the Dispute Resolution Commission or in the discussions between the central government and the THA. It's about a discussion that both parties should engage in if there's to be any resolution of the problem of inadequacy of funds.
Excellent. And moving forward, do you think that the Tobago representatives in the parliament, i.e., the representative for Tobago East and West, have any input in voicing the concerns of Tobagonians at the parliamentary level to echo the sentiment of Tobago needing more?
I am not in a position to comment on that, but I'd imagine that as representatives of particular constituencies, that is their responsibility. But I can't, I'm not in a position to say how well or how badly they have been doing this. But, like all other representatives of constituencies, that's a requirement on their part.
Excellent. And when we look at Tobago's overall contribution to the national purse, there's the argument that does Tobago contribute sufficiently for what it is requesting? But there's the other side of that coin that asks, how can one truly assess Tobago's contribution when definitions are not clear in regards to what defines Tobago and what defines Trinidad in regards to our marine borders, or the marine space? What is defined as Tobago and Trinidad when we look at some of our resources in the water, like oil and gas? When we look at things like tax being collected in Tobago, some of the businesses that operate in Tobago, they pay taxes in Trinidad. So how can one fully assess Tobago's overall contribution when these things are not very clear?
Well, there always be a lack of clarity in the system of taxation and the issue of the raising of revenue from both Tobago and Trinidad. What I do recall, however, is that in the late 1980s, when the economy of Trinidad and Tobago went south, that there was a decline in foreign exchange earnings of the country, and there's a decline in economic activity in the country, that when one looked at the data from Tobago, one saw that the advent of a tourism sector in Tobago was, in a sense, reducing the speed of decline in the overall economy of Trinidad and Tobago, so that Tobago was making a contribution in respect of foreign exchange earnings, which came from the tourism sector in Tobago. And if one were to project into the present, Tobago could be making a much larger contribution if it were able to get its tourism infrastructure, its tourism sector up to the level that it might have been, might have been anticipated maybe 15, 20 years ago. But clearly there has been a decline in the sector, and that's not good, neither for Tobago nor Trinidad, and for Trinidad and Tobago. And I think the attempt on the part of the THA and the government to address the issue of crime is critical, because Tobago has now is almost typified with the travel advisories that are being put out on Trinidad, travel to Trinidad. And it has to, in work that I've been involved in much earlier, maybe 15, 20 years ago, we did point out that Tobago needed to retain its characterization as being safe, clean, green, safe, and serene. And in order to ensure that it should be safe, it needed to invest in crime detection and crime, the fight back against crime. And we had recommended back then that the THA needed to invest in facilities at the port of Port of Spain to ensure that transport equipment, whether cars or trucks, whatever, should be checked routinely to make sure that there wasn't the transport of guns and so on into Tobago, to keep Tobago safe, even though Trinidad was already experiencing a crime problem.
All right.
Tobago needed to isolate itself. That it didn't happen, and we see the results,
All right.
that crime is up in Tobago.
And when we look from a national level, we hear the Prime
Mm.
Minister, saying that we need to buckle down for, difficult times ahead until 2027. What are your perspectives on this? Especially when we see economies in the Caribbean thriving, like Guyana, and our Prime Minister is now coming to say we have to, be, very prudent with the resources that we have up until 2027.
Well, the conditions in Guyana and Trinidad are vastly different. The economy of Guyana grew by over 50% last year or year before, largely on the basis of the finds of oil and the export of oil that has been established and has been found in large quantities in Guyana, as compared to Trinidad, where we have a difficulty, our capacity to deliver gas to the plants in Point Lisas has been severely constrained by the lack of finds within the last 10 or so years. So we have seen a decline in output of gas, extraction of gas and oil, as compared to Guyana, which has had massive increases, so that the conditions, since both surely the economy of Guyana now and the economy of Trinidad and Tobago has been driven by export of gas and oil, and in our case from the derivatives from gas. Since we don't have gas, it means that we would suffer a decline in revenue from foreign exchange earnings from the sector. And our sector, our economy is still dependent on the export of fossil fuels and the derivatives of fossil fuels. But you notice that the Prime Minister said that, well, we have to still depend on that sector, as limited as it is in its in production, to generate the resources to diversify the economy, because the essential problem of Trinidad and Tobago has been that we have been too reliant on the extraction of fossil fuel from what nature has provided. And we have to move to an economy which is driven by other export of other goods and services. Because again, another reality of Trinidad and Tobago, as is the case with the rest of the Caribbean, we just have to export to survive. Look around, you go
No,
home and you look at everything that we consume is based on a substantial amount of imported goods and also of services, and that those have to be paid for, and they can only be paid for with output that we produce that is required and is accepted and paid for by the international community. That's
right.
our
And
reality.
now, for a very long time, the conversation of economic diversification has been happening in Trinidad and
Yes,
Tobago. But what does
yes.
economic diversification truly look like?
It means that when we think of our reality going forward, it will mean that we will be exporting a whole range of goods and services, and also, to the extent possible, producing some of the goods that we need in our domestic community, including agricultural output from our agricultural sector. It means diversification is not finding an alternative product or alternative service, but finding a number of services, tourism being part of them too, all right, as well as goods that we can produce that we can sell in the international community.
Excellent.
That's the
Unit.
fact. So it's a range of things. It's not one thing, not one service. It's tourism and a range of other services, a range of other goods. That calls for a tremendous work on the part of the national community. It means, and I typify it as being, if one could boldly extract any lessons from our reality, is that the capital that we have in the ground, or we have had in the ground in terms of what nature has provided in terms of gas and oil, we have to see that is a capital that we have in our heads and that we can put in the heads of our people. The human capital, knowledge. Every head is a capacity, is a capacity for having knowledge and useful information that can be used to produce goods and services. So it's a capital in the head rather than the capital in the ground under us that will take us where we need to go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Henry. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with me, in terms of how to best utilize our limited resources here in Tobago and giving us, those perspectives. I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Thank you again. Guys, we're going to take a
Let me
quick
just
break. Go ahead.
let me just say the capital in the head is limitless when we understand what the challenge is. It's limitless based on what we put into our heads. So it means our education and training systems just have to be get up to speed, and we have to have a population willing to learn and to apply whatever they learn and knowledge and so on to produce goods and services. That's the challenge.
I totally agree. Thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break right here and we're going to be back with lots more conversations. See you soon, guys.
Nation start to rise. The energy fill the skies. I say,
and the